Right. Okay. So, welcome everybody. We have a few people here in the room. We have a few people on Zoom, and I have no doubt that we will have a lot of people later on listening to the recording. And I apologize right from the start to those of you who were really excited about getting to Birchat HaShachar, because last week we got as far as Moda Ani and Reshit Chochma, didn't we, Goldie?
Yes.
And we were, and Bernard Juster said that he'd found 12 things that he'd got wrong right before, even before he'd got to Birchat HaShachar, which gave us a lot of confidence. And we were going to do Birchat HaShachar today, and I am going to take it through from the start of davening all the way through. However, I think that tonight, and we're going to take a sidestep, because tonight we begin, or we began, depending on whether you've yet davened Mariv, to say V'tein tal umatar livracha. And there are lots of different halachot, and we are going to go through some interesting stuff tonight. This, you might think, is a shiur about Tefilah, but we are going to do some mathematics, we are going to do some astronomy, and we are going to do some history tonight. In all of those things, that's why Halachot and Judaism is so exciting, because it actually encompasses everything. So, V'tein tal umatar livracha. Okay, we start saying that here in Israel tonight. What is so special about tonight? Why on the, what date is it today? The 31st of October, are we starting to say V'tein tal? First of all, okay, let's go back one step. What is V'tein tal umatar livracha? Okay, what is it? It's not a blessing, actually. It's a request. Okay. We have a blessing about rain, which we spoke about on Simchat Torah. And what is the blessing that we make for rain? Mashiv HaRuach. That's the blessing. We are blessing HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We say Mashiv HaRuach, Umarid HaGeshem, which means he who causes the wind to blow and the rain to fall. We say that within the bracha of Gvura. Okay, the second bracha. First bracha is Avot, yes, in the Shemona, I'm talking about in the Shemona Esra. Okay, we're talking, that's the first bracha. The second bracha, which talks about, how does it begin? Ata Gibor. We're saying, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you are Gibor. What's a Gibor?
Mighty man.
Mighty person, like Philip. Yeah, mighty man. Ata Gibor. You are, we're saying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you are mighty. And within that might, we recognize, we bless HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as it were, like he needs our blessing, but we recognize his gvura, his mightiness, his might. And part of that recognition is that he is the one who is Mashiv HaRuach, who causes the wind to blow. Umorid HaGeshem, they are causative verbs. Mashiv, he who causes to blow. Umorid, he who causes to bring down, who causes the rain to fall. So we are, as it were, in that bracha, we are blessing HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the rain and the wind that we get. That's the bracha. We spoke about that on Simchat Torah, because that was a time when we start to say it. In Chutz La'aretz, it's on Shmini Atzeret. Of course, here Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah are all one day. So we start saying that right at the end of Sukkot, after Shmini Atzeret, or on Shmini Atzeret, because that's when the winter starts. Okay, what do you say when you every day has a greeting that we have in Judaism? Yeah, from Motzei Shabbat through till Tuesday, you say Shavua Tov, or a Gitavoch. From Wednesday through to Shabbat, you say Shabbat Shalom. Right, you have a good Shabbat. Right. On Shmini Atzeret. Well, okay, let's go further back. Beginning of Elul, what do we say? We say L'shana Tova. Gemach Tima Tova after Rosh Hashanah. We say Gemach Chatima Tova. Sukkot, we say Chag Sameach. And after Shmini Atzeret, what do we say? On Motzei Shmini Atzeret, what do you say?
Vintage.
No, we're finished with. Philip's right. We say Choref Tov or a Gittin Winter. A Gittin Winter. Choref Tov. Okay, because why do we say that on Motzei Shmini Atzeret? Because that's when the winter begins. So the halacha is that you start to pray for rain in the winter when it's meant to be raining, right? So when should we start saying V'tein tal umatar livracha? On Shmini Atzeret, in exactly the same time when we recognize, if we are already recognizing that it is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's gvura, strength, that causes the rain to fall, why are we not asking for rain at the beginning of the winter? Jeff, come on. We don't want to get wet going home. That's right. Gemara, if you want to look it up, it's in.
It was to allow the people who came for Aliyah Regel.
That's right. Let me just repeat that because the people on Zoom can't hear everybody in the room. Faye said it's to allow the people that were Ole Regel that came to Yerushalayim for the Chag to get home in time before it starts to rain. Because when it starts raining, of course, they didn't just get wet running from the plain to the steps. The muddy roads meant that their wagons got stuck and it was a balagan. So we who are here in Eretz Israel are kind folk, and we don't want our friends from Chutz La'aretz or even from the north of Israel, who takes them a while to get back as well from being Ola Regel. We don't want them to get stuck in the mud, so we delay asking for rain. Now, if you want to find out, if you want to look it up, by the way, where that comes from, where's Faye gone? If you want to look up what Faye said about waiting for all those that are Regel, it's in Gemara Tanit, Daf Yud Amud Aleph, if you want to look it up. And the rabbis say there that we wait for 2 weeks. Okay, 2 weeks after Shmini Atzeret takes us to today, the 7th of Cheshvan. Okay, Shmini Atzeret is on what day? Okay, let's go back. What day is Sukkot?
23rd of
22nd. The Sukkot is the 15th of Tishrei, and then we have Shmini Atzeret is the 22nd. Okay, the 8th. Yeah, count it. 15. Remember, we're starting 15th is the first day, not the 0 day. So it's the 22nd of Tishrei is Shmini Atzeret. 2 weeks on from there. Well, 1 week is the 29th. That's the end of the month. Another week is the 7th. Okay. Now, Frank, you made a face there. Why did you make a face? In this Tishrei, there's 30 days because we had 2 days Yom Tov. You're right. But we don't. When they made this rule, okay, back in the time of the Mishnah, they were still working on the fact that it was a 29-day month until it was a 30-day month. So it was an assumption. So that's why the 7th of Cheshvan. Good question there. Could see that with your face. 7th of Cheshvan is 2 weeks after Shmini Atzeret. So the 7th of Cheshvan, 2 weeks. Those who have not got home by 2 weeks have schlepped, and they should have got home by 2 weeks. And now we can start to pray for rain. So we start to request rain. We have already recognized the Gevurah for 2 weeks by this time. But now we can start to request the rain. V'tein tal umatar livracha. And where do we say that? In which bracha? We said Mashiv Haruach Umorid HaGeshem in the bracha of Gevurah. Every bracha in the Shemona Esrei has a name. Okay. The first one is Avot, talks about the Avot. The second one is Gevurah because it talks about Hashem's might. There's a bracha in which we say V'tein tal umatar livracha. What's that bracha? Birkat Hashanim. Ronen says Birkat Hashanim. I only said that just to show you that I remembered your name this time. Okay, and that's Amir. I've got it now. I've absolutely got it. Okay, so Ronen says correctly, the bracha is called Birchat Hashanim, because what are we doing? What's the bracha? Somebody pass me a siddur, please. Can I borrow your siddur a sec? Thank you very much. So in Shmona Esra, we say, Barech Aleinu Adonai Eloheinu et Hashana Hazot ve'et kol minei tvuata letova. Translation: Barech Aleinu, bless for us, Hashem, et Hashana Hazot, bless this year, ve'et kol minei tvuata letova, and all its tvuata. It's a
harvest.
It's produce, yes, correct. All its harvests, all its produce, meaning whatever we do for Parnassah, it's really a bracha for Parnassah, this. Whatever it is that we do for Parnassah, whether we're farmers and we're talking about produce, mamash, real sort of produce, or whether we're talking about whatever we might do, not involved in physical activity, but whatever makes us a living, we're asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu to bless the produce. Now, bearing in mind that we are or were an agricultural, society. What is it that will make us have good produce? Rain. So the next few words go v'tein, tal, umatar, livracha. V'tein comes from the word to give, from latet, to give. Tenli, okay, tenli yad. Okay, so ten means to give. So we're asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu, v'tein, give us, tal, dew, umatar, and rain. Matar is another type of rain. Geshem is rain. Matar is another type of rain. And how do we want this this dew and this rain? Livracha, as a blessing, because of course rain can be a curse as well. So we're asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we're being a bit chutzpahdik here. Not only are we asking for the rain, we want it livracha, because this is all about our parnassah. We don't want the rain to come and wash away our crops. We want it to come and water our crops. Al pnei adama, on the face of the earth, v'sab'enu mituva, and satisfy us, sabeinu, the same word as ve'achalta, v'savata, uveirachta, mituva, from your goodness, or from its goodness, actually. There's two versions of that. In Nusach Ashkenaz, interesting, what's it saying there? In the art scroll, I've got an art scroll here of Goldis, and it says in the Nusach Ashkenaz, yes, in the Nusach Ashkenaz art scroll, it says v'sabeinu mituvecha, okay, and we should be satisfied from your goodness. We're talking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Small anecdote.
One sec. And in the Nusach Sfard, as one of the things that we're going to do as we go along in this shiur is we're going to point out some of the differences between Nusach Ashkenaz and Nusach Sfard, so that the Nusach Ashkenaz daveners, which I think is probably most of us, are not so frightened of the Nusach Sfard, because when they first come here, people are frightened because it's, we've got to say extra words like Vayatzmach b'kona b'kona v'shichei, right? But one of the things which is a difference is here in the Nusach Sfard, in the Rinat Yisrael, which is what we use here, it says V'sabeinu mituvah, not mituvecha. Now the difference is we are saying there that we should be satisfied from its goodness, talking about land. Same thing really, because the Kadosh Baruch Hu sends the rain, but Ashkenaz says mituvecha. We say to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, we should be satisfied from your goodness, and in Nusach Sfard it says mituva, from the goodness of the land. Yes, Philip, nice and loud so the people.
I was in London this week for the shiva of my brother, unfortunately, and I was asked to daven. I couldn't. I said no. After the first night, I made so many mistakes according to their nusach, to the nusach Ashkenaz, that I just gave up. I didn't. Okay,
so there's a good example, and we're going to talk. Actually, for those of you that didn't hear that, Philip said that when he was davening there unfortunately, he was sitting shiva in London in a nusach Ashkenaz kehila there, and he made too many mistakes when he did the nusach Ashkenaz when he was davening for the kehila, because he was used to nusach Sfard. So the idea that what we're trying to do is to make people more and more familiar with it so they don't make mistakes. But of course, it's what you get used to. And I'm going to go through tonight. There are some big differences about Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz when it comes to V'tein Tal umatar livracha. We've not got there yet, but we will get to that. And then there's all sorts of questions which will need to be answered. So on the 7th of Cheshvan, we begin to say V'tein Tal umatar livracha because our friends who have come here to be Ole Regel have got home by now, and it's safe, as it were, for us to ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu to bring the rains, to water the crops, so that we should have a good year. And that is why it is in the bracha of Barech Aleinu, which is known as Birchat Hashanim, as Ronen said, Birchat Hashanim, the blessing of the years, because we're asking for a blessed year. Okay, so that's the right place to ask for rain, because we're asking for rain to improve the produce of the land. Okay, very good. Now, in Chutz La'aretz, they will not start saying V'tein Tal umatar livracha tonight. When will they start saying that? The 4th of December, or the 5th of December, depending on whether it's a leap year the next year or not. Is it a civil leap year next year? No, it's not, is it? Because it's going to be 23, and it's only if it's divisible by 4. So it will be on the 4th of December tonight. Now, I ask you a simple question. What has the 4th of December, which is part of the solar calendar, got to do with us who run our lives largely on the lunar calendar? Our months go according to the months, the moon, don't we? We have a Rosh Chodesh, and when we have Rosh Chodesh, we have a new moon, the little crescent, new crescent of the moon. So what has the 4th of December got to do with us?
Something to do with the equinox.
What did you say, Paul?
Something to do with the equinox, I believe.
It is to do with the equinox. You're absolutely right. And that's more or less what Bernard said here, which is that rainy seasons are due go along with the seasons which are solar issues. So that's true. But because we don't have an entirely lunar calendar, those of you who've been with us in the Sanhedrin Shiur will know we spent months learning about the various different equinoxes and how they affect the calendar of intercalating a year. In other words, a Jewish leap year where we add in an extra month. Why do we do that? Because we know from the Torah that Pesach has to be in the spring. So if we don't have a correction, every year Pesach will move by how many days? How many days is a solar year? Yes. How many days is a lunar year?
360.
354. It's 11 days short. So if we don't have a Jewish leap year, as it were, about every 3 years, it works out 7 times in a 19-year cycle. Pesach will keep moving. Now, lahavdil, one sec, Bruce. Lahavdil, the Muslims who also work on a lunar calendar do not have a correction. So their month of Ramadan moves 11 days back in as it were in the solar year every year, which is why sometimes Ramadan is in the summer, sometimes Ramadan is in the spring, sometimes it's in the winter, sometimes it's in the autumn, and it sort of works its way back over a period of time till where it started in the first place. And of course, they don't like it when it's in the summer because they have to fast from sunrise to sunset. And that's problematic for them in the long days. So we, on the other hand, have a corrective issue. We have Pesach that has to be in the spring because the Torah says so. B'chodesh ha'aviv, in the month of spring. So that is a fixed thing. Spring, as Bernard and Paul have said, the seasons are fixed by the solar calendar, not by the lunar calendar. So our calendar that we work by is not strictly speaking a lunar calendar. It's called a lunar solar calendar or a solar lunar calendar. It's a combination of the both. It's based on the lunar calendar, but it has a correction so that it's more or less in sync with the solar calendar. And of course, when we have a leap year like we had this year, which is the correction, everything is pushed back by a month because it was getting too early. If we didn't do it now, Pesach would be before the spring equinox, which would make it in the winter, not in the spring, and we can't have that. So we have this correction now. So apart from this correction, all of our activities in the Jewish calendar according to the lunar calendar. Pesach is the 14th, 15th, 14th afternoon of 14th, 15th of Nisan. Shavuot is the 6th of Sivan, right? Rosh Hashanah is the 1st of Tishrei, etc., etc. The only thing that we do Jewishly, according to the pure solar calendar, is V'tein tal umatar livracha. Why? Outside of Eretz Israel, correct. Correct, Jeff. Outside of Eretz Israel, we say it on the 4th of December. So the first question is, why are we getting involved in the solar calendar? Secondly, why the 4th of December? Somebody has picked the 4th of December out of the air and said, right, that's the day we're going to start saying V'tein tal umatar livracha in Chutz La'aretz. Why? Those two questions are a bit linked to one another. So first question, why do we get involved in the solar calendar in Chutz La'aretz when we're talking about asking for rain? Well, the answer is what Bernard said and that Paul said, and that is that it's praying for rain. Now, it turns out, I can only quote this from the Rishonim and Achronim. I don't know whether this is accurate in today's society or what have you, but apparently in Bavel, which is Iraq, modern day Iraq, in Bavel, the need for rain begins much later. It begins about 2 months into the winter. In other words, 2 months after the autumn equinox. Okay, and so the Chachamim, bearing in mind the Gemara, most of the Gemara that we quote which Gemara? Bavli, Talmud Bavli, which was written in Bavel. It was written in Bavel. So most of the halachot that we are basing these things on were written in Bavel. There is a Talmud that was written in, it wasn't written in Yerushalayim, actually. It was written in Eretz Israel, in the north, in the Galil, but for some reason it's called Talmud Yerushalmi. Why do you think it's called Talmud Yerushalmi? Yeah, because you'd think it would be credibility. Absolutely, Yerushalayim is, Yerushalayim's the capital city. So it's called the Talmud Yerushalmi, and that was written in Eretz Israel. But that has been less widely learned. And when there is a dispute between Talmud Yerushalmi and Talmud Bavli, not always, but very often, it's split along Sephardi and Ashkenazi lines. In other words, when there's a machloket between Yerushalmi and Bavli, one set go with the Bavli and one set go with the Yerushalmi. Which one do you think it is? Who do you think goes with the Bavli and who do you think goes with the Yerushalmi, generally speaking? Okay, Elisheva says the Sephardim go with the Bavli and the Ashkenazim go with the Yerushalmi. Jeff's shaking his head. He thinks it's the other way around. Okay, hands up those that think that the Sephardim go with the Bavli and Ashkenazim go with Yerushalmi. Hands up. Okay, hands up those that think it's the other way around. Pretty split there. It's a machloket. Actually, Elisheva is right. Of course, you didn't need me to tell you that because she's always right. Right? And I know that because she told me. So anyway, Yes, that's how it goes. But that's a separate issue. So in Bavel, apparently, the rain is required later than in Eretz Israel. That we just have to accept as a fact that was said by the rabbis, and that is why in Bavel they started to say Tein Talu Mata Livracha at that time, 60 days after the equinox. Now, the next question is, well, why do we say Tein Talu Mata Livracha elsewhere in the diaspora? We're not in Iraq. We're in London, we're in New York or Passaic or we don't. We should be saying V'tein Talu Mata Livracha in England all the time, especially in Manchester. We certainly should be saying Mashi Baruach and Morid Hageshem all the time. So why are we hooked up on Bavel when? And I think the answer is very obvious, and that is you can't have a situation that, in Manchester, we're going to say it on such a day, and in London, you're going to say it on such a day, and in New Jersey, you'll say it on such a day, and in wherever, you'll say it somewhere else. It's too complicated. So it's Chutz La'aretz, and it's Eretz Israel. Yes, Jeff? Okay. Okay. So I'll just repeat the question for the purposes of those listening in. Jeff says, where are we davening for rain for? Oh, surely we should, wherever we are in the world, we should be davening for rain in Eretz Israel, because Eretz Israel is the center of our existence. Even if we're living outside of Israel, we're only living outside of Israel temporarily until the time when we're all brought back in Kibbutz Galuyot. So we should be praying for it, and there is a significant logic to that, and actually a powerful argument, which we will talk about when we talk about Mervin. Okay, why am I going to talk about Mervin? I'm going to talk about Mervin in a bit, and that is relevant to when I talk about Mervin. Now, we're going to get to him in a bit. So we've now explained why outside of Israel we say Tein Talu Mata Livracha at a different time to Eretz Israel, because in Bavel they needed the rain in a different time, which answers the question straight away that certainly in that regard we are praying for rain for ourselves wherever we happen to be, and that's important. I want you to hold on to that piece of information, because it's going to be important when we ask the question, what do you do when you move from Eretz Israel to Chutz La'aretz during this period of the 7th of Cheshvan to the 4th of December, when we're not in sync with one another? So hold that idea that at least in Bavel, they were davening for rain for themselves. Okay, now, so we've answered that question. We know it's because they need rain in a different time than we need rain. Now, the next question was, why the 4th of December? And I told you the answer to that, because it's 60 days after the equinox. Is it 60 days? Now, when I did this, I touched on this subject in the shiur that I did on Mashi Baruach on Shmini Atzeret. And sitting over here was Paul Kuttner, who is an accountant, and he said, hang on a minute, that doesn't work, because the equinox, when is the winter equinox? Or the autumn equinox? The 20th of what? Okay, so somebody said 20th of September. Any other offers? 21st of September. 20. No. Yeah, no. We're talking about the equinox. The equinox is the time when the sun is at the opposite part of the equator, so the night and the day are equal. Okay, that's why it's called equinox. Equi meaning equal, nox meaning night. The night and the day are equal. So it's the 20th, the 21st, or the 23rd of September. There are various different calculations between the 21st and the 23rd. But let's take the 23rd as a figure of the equinox. That's when the equinox is the 23rd of September. When is 60 days after the 23rd of September. Okay, when is 60 days not after the 23rd? It's not the 4th of December. 23rd of September plus 60 days is about the 23rd of November, isn't it? Because there are another 7 days in September, 31 days in October, that's 38, and another 22 to take you up to 60. So it should be 22nd, or the night of the 22nd of November. It's nowhere near the 23rd of November, which is where it works out. It's not the 4th of December. So I've been telling you a whole lot of rubbish, haven't I? I told you that we start saying V'tein talu umatar livracha in chutz la'aretz 60 days after the equinox. That's not true. Okay, and so what? The winter, I'll just repeat that. So Bernard says the shortest day of the year is 21st of December, and I say, so what? What's that got to do with the price of cheese? Nothing at all. Okay, so why is the 4th of December the time when we start saying it? And I repeat to you that the answer is that it's 60 days after the equinox. And you're going to say to me, but you just told me that's not true, because it's 60 days after the equinox is the 23rd of November. So have I got the equinox wrong? Okay, so I told you that we were going to do some maths. We've done the maths, right? We've done the 60 days. I told you we were going to do some astronomy. We've done that. We've talked about the equinox. Now, I also told you we were going to do some history, didn't I? Here's the history. What's the difference? Okay, now, what calendar do we work on today? What's it called? The calendar. The Gregorian calendar. The Gregorian calendar. Okay, okay, first of all, who instituted the Gregorian calendar?
Pope Gregory.
Pope Gregory.
Pope Gregory.
Pope Gregory. Which one? Which Pope Gregory? Pope Gregory the what?
He was a bad guy. He didn't like
They were all bad guys, the popes. That doesn't cut it down. Pope Gregory the 13th. Okay, Pope Gregory the 13th introduced the Gregorian I keep a problem with that word. Gregorian calendar in which year?
1300. No, sorry. About 400 after.
No. Much later than that. 1582. The Gregorian calendar. Philip was thinking of that, only he said 400. He meant 1500, but you know. So when I owe you 1500 shekels, I'll just give you 400. Is that okay? Okay, so the Gregorian calendar began in 1582, introduced by Pope Gregory the 13th. And what did it replace?
The Julian calendar.
The Julian calendar, correct. And who do you think introduced the Julian calendar?
Pope Julian.
Correct, Julius Caesar. Now, what was the difference? What is the difference? And why did Pope Gregory the 13th see the need to update the calendar? What was the problem that was pertinent at that time? And what was his solution? Anyone know?
It was Easter. It was actually with Easter and Passover.
Yeah, it was to do with Easter, Paul. You're right. It was to do with Easter. Okay, so the problem was this, that the principal difference is how you space the leap years. Because the average year over a period of time, the average calendar year is 365.2425 days long. Okay, so if it was 365.25 a quarter, it would be easy, wouldn't it? Because every 4 years you'd have an extra day. You'd have a February the 29th every 4 years. Well, isn't that what we do? Oh, it's a quarter of a 0.25 is a quarter. And I'm talking about the Jewish year. I'm talking about the civil year. We have a leap year every 4 years. So, but we don't, do we? When do we not have a leap year? When we have a leap year every year that is divisible by 4. So 2024 will be a leap year. But there are certain exceptions. What are the exceptions? When do we not have a leap year? When it is divisible by 4.
In the millennium.
The millennium is one of them, yes, but more than that.
Every century.
Every century. Every century. So 1900, actually the millennium is not true. We do have a leap year on the millennium. That's the exception to the exception. So the exception to the rule is that the rule is this: every year that's divisible by 4 is a civil leap year, except the century year, except the century year that is divisible by 400. Now, why is it so complicated? Because God made it that way, because he made the average solar year 365.2425 years. And what's amazing is that these guys came up with this calculation that if you do an extra day every 4 years, except the century year, except the century year that's divisible by 400, then it will all work out beautifully. Amazing. No? Amazing. Now, the problem was,
There has to be another second or something.
Sorry, Paul?
Every so often there has to be an extra second somewhere around there is a further adjustment needed, I believe.
There was a further adjustment, that's right. So Gregory came up and said, hang on a minute, we're getting a bit of a problem here, because by 1582, the Julian calendar was not as exact as I've just explained. That's the Gregorian calendar that I've just explained to you. The Julian calendar had it so that they were, by this time, they were a little bit out, quite a bit out, actually, as it turns out, because the Julian calendar assumed the average solar year to be exactly 365.25 years. Okay, so it's actually 0.2425. So they assumed it to be 0.0075 days longer than it was. Now, when did the Julian calendar come into effect? Well, they did a calculation that starting in 325. Okay, in the year 325, in the first council of Nicaea, in 325 CE, that was when it started. Now, by 1582, the excess of those 0.0075 days per year had accumulated up to a period of 10 days. There were 10 days. It had already drifted by 10 full days, which meant that, and I think Paul mentioned this, it meant that Easter was out of sync. Turns out, guys, that Easter, like Pesach, has to be in a certain place. They work out Easter by the equinox. They don't work it out by Pesach. They work it out. It's always around that time. Yes. But they don't work out. You're right. But they don't work out there on basis of Pesach, on the lunar calendar like we do. They work it on the basis of where the spring equinox is. Now, what was happening was the dates were 10 days out. So what happened was on 1582, on Thursday, the 4th of October, 1582, Pope Gregory said, good night, everybody. In the morning, it's going to be Friday, the 15th of October. They missed out the days between the 4th of October and the 15th of October. They were 10 days behind, all right? They were 10 days behind by 1582. So the 4th of October was followed by the 15th of October in 1582. Thursday the 4th, the next day was, instead of being Friday the 5th, it was Friday the 15th of October, 1582. Okay, and so that put back Easter where it should be. And what was happening was the astronomical new moons, in other words, the actual new moon, according to the setting it, was 4 days out of sync. with actually what was happening. So they were having Rosh Chodesh 4 days, either before or after. I can't actually work this out on my head right now, out of sync with the actual Rosh Chodesh. Now, so that's your 10 days. We've had since then, since 1582, we've had another 400 years or so, right? Now, if every 100 years there's a quarter of a day's difference, in 400 years, we've got another day. So now those 10 days are now 11 days. So 11 days after where the winter equinox would have been, take 11 days. We said the winter equinox, the autumn equinox, I beg your pardon, is September 23rd, right? We've lost 11 days, or we've added 11 days. Remember, the 4th of October was followed by the 15th of October. So the 23rd of September will be, instead of being the next day would be the 24th of September, it would be the 34th of October, of September, which is, of course, the 4th of October. So the 4th of October is actually where the autumn equinox is, because we've lost those 10 days. What is 60 days after the 4th of October? Ta-da! It's the 4th of December. And that is how we get to say V'tein tal umatar livracha in Chutz La'aretz on the 4th of December. Okay, now hands up anybody that knew that. Not me, I didn't know that until I looked it up. So there you are. We now have the answer to our question as to why we say Tein tal umatar livracha in Eretz Israel on the 7th of Cheshvan, so that our friends can get home. Why do we say it later? It's 60 days after the equinox, because in Bavel, that's when they wanted the rain. And why does it not work out? Because the winter equinox actually, we've mucked up with the calendar. The Gregorian calendar and the Julian calendar don't work out, and they worked it out according to the 4th of October being the winter equinox, so autumn equinox, and not September the 23rd, which is in ours. Yeah, Bruce, you wanted a question first, and then Frank.
What year was this change made in our Shmona Esrei? Because the change in the calendar was not made until 15.
Yeah, so long time. So Bruce's question is when was it worked out that we should say V'tein tal umatar livracha on the 4th of December? A long time before that, and that is why, because what in fact the 4th of December, the 4th of October, is the 60 days after the equinox would be the 4th of December. Once they're mucked up with the calendar, the 4th of December, the 4th of October was in fact the 23rd of September, because the old money, okay, as it were. So yeah, it predates that. Frank, you had a question. Same question. Okay, right now. So we now know why we do what we do. I'm getting to Mervyn very soon. Okay, so we now know what we do based on where we are. Now, of course, back in the day, you were where you were, right? There wasn't a lot of travel going on between Eretz Israel and Chutz La'aretz. So if you were in Eretz Israel, if you lived in Eretz Israel, that's where you were. If you lived in Chutz La'aretz, you only went to Eretz Israel when? To be Ola Regel, and then you went home again. Okay, so that's where you were. You weren't flitting backwards and forwards like we are.
It was like going to the Hajj.
Yeah, you did it 3 times a year, and that was it. Nowadays, of course, we have another problem, and that is that we move around a lot. Coming to Mervyn soon. We move around a lot. Philip, yesterday, was in England, and today he's in Eretz Israel. But what if it was tomorrow? Let's say he was going to England tomorrow. Tonight he starts saying V'tein tal umatar. In the morning he says V'tein tal umatar at Shacharit. By the time he gets to Mincha, when he gets to London and he's having Mincha, he's no longer in an area where he says V'tein tal umatar livracha, because they don't start saying that until the 4th of December. So what does he do? The question is, What does a resident of Israel do when he goes to Chutz La'aretz between the 7th of Cheshvan and the 4th of December? Because he's already started to say V'tein Talumata, and they in Chutz La'aretz have not. Various different options, which we'll go through one sec. And the same thing applies the other way around. What about a visitor, somebody who lives in Chutz La'aretz, who comes to Eretz Israel for a holiday, for whatever reason, and he's there during this period between the 7th of Cheshvan and the 4th of December? Does he do as the Romans do and say V'tein Talumata Livracha because he finds himself in Israel? Or does he stick with what his community are doing back in Chutz La'aretz? And then what about when he goes back again? Is he switching and swapping and switching, or does he stick with it all? Right, Philip, what do you think?
Go according to the principle of Dina de Malchus of Dina. So if you change, you should go according to the minhag in that place. That's why I decided not to daven for an Amud yesterday. When I was in London, because I was making so many mistakes. I wasn't davening according to their way of davening.
Okay.
I think Dina de Malchus of Dina.
Okay, so it's not quite Dina de Malchus of Dina because it's not a din of the country that you have to say that. But I know what you mean. What you're saying, you're really saying Minhag HaMakom.
Yeah.
Minhag HaMakom. Okay, so
We had the same question with Sphira.
yeah, so it's even worse with Spira, and I'll tell you why it's worse with Spira in a minute. But let's just take Philip's point here. Philip's got a reasonable logic there, and that is Minhag HaMakom. You go to a place, that's what you do. If you go, for example, in Eretz Israel, if you're somebody who lives in Chutz La'aretz and on Chol HaMoed, Pesach and Sukkot, you're somebody who puts on tefillin. If you come here where nobody puts on tefillin, no, you don't come and bring your tefillin to shul, or if you do, like I did once, you get shouted at, right? So you don't do it. Why? Minhag HaMakom, the minhag of the places, you don't do it. So Philip's logic sounds good. Okay, anybody want to dissent from that?
Me.
One sec, Paul, I'll come to you in a sec, Paul.
I think your private villa will carry on with what you've been doing where you come from. And if you are the Sheikh's support and you're traveling from an maybe that country, you then go.
Okay, Frank says that if you are in your private tefillah, you will do where you come from. And if you are davening for the Amud, then you have to do as the minhag of the makom is. That is also a logic to that. And it fits in with some opinions. So we'll come back to that. Paul, you had a suggestion?
I agree with that, except if you started to say saying Talumata, you don't revert. You keep saying it to yourself even if you come back to our Chutz La'aretz. And if you said it here with the tzibur, then you carry on saying it.
Okay, so Paul says, if you happen to be from Chutz La'aretz, but you happen to be in Israel on the 7th of Cheshvan or beyond for a while, and you started saying V'tein Talumata Livracha, when you go back to Chutz La'aretz, you continue saying V'tein Talumata Livracha in your tefillot, because you've started it, and therefore you'll carry on. Is that what you're saying, Paul?
Yes, unless you're davening for the Amud. Yeah.
Unless you're davening for the Amud. Okay. Any other suggestions? Well, there is the suggestion that Jeff hinted at earlier on, and that is, are we not all davening for Eretz Israel anyway? And the Ramban, of course, would agree with that. The Ramban would say you shouldn't be in Chutz La'aretz anyway, and you're only practicing while you're there because everything is focused on Eretz Israel. And that brings me to Mervyn. Why does it bring me to Mervyn? Because Mervyn comes from South Africa, which is in the Southern Hemisphere, right? So he's all upside down to start with, because he has to a different Shiloh altogether. Because when he's in South Africa and it's summer, it's our winter, and we're saying V'tein Talumata Livracha, what does he say? What do they say in South Africa and Australia and all the places in the Southern Hemisphere? When do they say in the winter, in our winter, their summer, do they say V'tein Talumata Livracha? Or, which you would think, well, if it's the 4th of December, the 4th of December, And I can only tell you what it's like in Australia in the 4th of December. It's flipping hot, right? It's the middle of the summer. They won't be praying for rain. Well, they might be praying for rain, but I mean, it's a bit, it's not when they have their rainy season. Their rainy season is when we have got flipping hot, right? In the middle of our summer is their rainy season. So what do they do in the Southern Hemisphere? That's Mervin's dilemma. So that's a different question altogether. Let's answer the second question first, because it's simpler. So what do you think the answer is? What do you think? Okay, let's ask Mervin if he can remember. When you lived in South Africa, Mervin, can you remember whether you said V'tein talu mata livracha in your winter or our winter? Can you remember? Can't remember. Okay. Okay, so Mervin says, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. What I'm trying to establish is, what do the Romans do in the Southern Hemisphere? So Bernard, who lived in Brazil, which is also in the Southern Hemisphere. Okay, so Bernard says that when he was in Brazil, he said, V'tein talu mata livracha, in his summer and our winter. And the reason being, Israel, not Europe, as you first said, right? We're not interested what Europe does. We're interested in, unless you say Israel's in Europe, which I suppose in certain things it is, in the Eurovision Song Contest, so it must be in Europe, right? It's in the UEFA Cup, so it must be in Europe. Right, so Israel is the center of our existence. So in the Southern Hemisphere, that is correct, that is the halakha. In the Southern Hemisphere, rather obtusely, they go with Jeff's original idea. Now, the question is that I have, and I don't know the answer to this question, I don't know if there is an answer. What's the difference between Brazil and Australia and South Africa and anywhere else in the Southern Hemisphere versus Bavel? If in the Southern Hemisphere, ask the question differently, if in Bavel we're davening for rain when we want it in Bavel, i.e. 60 days after the equinox, why not in Brazil do you not do it in the summer? I don't know the answer to that question.
But you said it yourself. You said it yourself before, long before. You said you have one rule for the diaspora and one rule for Eretz Israel. Otherwise, it gets too confused.
Okay, all right. Okay, so all right. That's fair comment. Paul says it would be too complicated because, as I said before, you can't have one rule for Bavel, one rule for Egypt, one rule for Manchester, one rule for New York. Outside of Israel is outside of Israel, and therefore in the diaspora in the Southern Hemisphere, doesn't matter which hemisphere you're in, you're outside Eretz Israel, and therefore that's a good answer, that Paul. I think that fits. And what I was one second, Ronen, what I was going to say was that actually at the time when the halakha was fixed, there probably weren't very many Jews in the Southern Hemisphere. I don't think, I mean, I may be wrong on that. That may be nonsense. But as far as I can think, I don't think that the migration of Jews to the Southern Hemisphere had probably not taken hold in any great shape or form. And therefore, the Shiur didn't actually arise. And that brings us to the Sphira question. I'll come to you in a sec, Ronen. That brings us to the Sphira question that Bruce asked, which was, what about the Sphira? Why I said that's a bigger problem. The reason that's a bigger problem is that here we're talking about davening. We're talking about Shmona Esra. Shmona Esra is not a mitzvah d'oraita. It's not a Torah law. It's very important. It's not a Torah law. Okay, the only Torah brachot that we say are those of Birchat Hamazon, of benching. Sphira is a Torah law. Counting the Sphira, usfartem lechem imocharat Shabbat sheva Shabbatot mimot. You have to count 7 complete weeks, and that's a big problem. Counting Sphira and crossing the international date line is a nightmare. And actually, the rabbis answer, there's a very modern Shiur. Nobody crossed the international date line back in the time of the Mishnah. The modern rabbis say you should really try hard not to do that because it's really problematic. Because you cannot do that going, if you're crossing the international date line going east, you're not going to have 7 complete weeks because you've missed a day somewhere along the line. And so international date line travel is not recommended during the period of the Sefira. I'm serious. That's, I mean, there are very many religious Jews, very particularly observant Jews, who will not travel across the international date line during the Sefira exactly because of that problem. Okay, so we're nearly out of time, and I want to finish the subject. So in the Southern Hemisphere, probably because of the reason that Paul gave, that Chutz La'aretz, it's Chutz La'aretz, combined with the reason that I gave, that there weren't any Jews or very few Jews in that area, so we don't need to worry about it. Outside of Eretz Israel is outside of Eretz Israel. But what about the traveling back and forward question? And we'll finish with this because this is important because it's relevant to people. Frank, are you going back before the 4th of December to the UK? Okay, so it's relevant to Frank, what he does. And so the answer is, as all good Jewish questions have, it's a machloket. There are various differing opinions, and there are a number of different opinions, and people, I can't say will pick and choose what you do, but depending on whom you ask and who they will go according to. Most of the Ashkenazi poskim will go according to the Mishnah Brura, and the Mishnah Brura says that you should, let me just make sure that I get this right, so that I need to just look it up, because if I don't get it right, I'll have everybody on my back. So let me get it absolutely correct. The Mishnah Brura, here we go. The Mishnah Brura says that when you are in Eretz Israel, if you're visiting from, it depends on how long you're going to stay. If you're going to stay the whole period, so you arrive, let's say you come for Sukkot, and you're here, or even after Sukkot, you're here from before the 7th of Cheshvan, and you're staying here for that whole period of time where there's a difference. In other words, up till the 4th of December. You're not going back to Chutz La'aretz until the 5th of December. Then it's easy. You say, B'tein Talumata Livracha, the whole time, as when in Rome, do as the Romans do, okay? Because you're in Rome, as it were, for that whole period. The problem arises when you're not here for that whole period. And one opinion is that if you are here for a period of time, and then you know you're going back, that in your private tefillot, you should say where you actually come from. So if your main residence is in Chutz La'aretz and you're visiting Eretz Israel, and you're only here for part of that period, you should not say B'tein Talumata Livracha. You should continue to say what you will go back to say when you return to Chutz La'aretz on the 30th of November or the 20th of November, whenever it is before the 4th or 5th of December, so that you're not chopping and changing. Of course, if you're going to daven for the Omid, if you're going to daven for the Kehillah, you have to do what's minhag hamakom. You can't impose your outside minhag on somebody else. So in that scenario, if you were an Avel and you took the Amud, then you would say B'tein Talumata Livracha here. But in your silent Shmona Esra, regularly, you would say B'tein Bracha, because you're going to go back to the Chutz La'aretz situation before they change. Now, there's another machloket within that. What if you're davening for the Amud? Generally speaking, take me, for example. I daven in my private prayers, Nusach Ashkenaz, okay? When I daven for the Amud, I daven Nusach Sfard, clearly, because this is a Nusach Sfard shul. There's a general principle that when a Shliach Tzibur is saying his own private Shmona Esra, when he's the Shliach Tzibur, he has to say it in the Nusach that he's going to say it when he repeats it. Why? Yeah, so he doesn't make a mistake. So if I'm the Chazan and I'm saying my silent Shmona Esra at Nusach Ashkenaz, and then immediately I'm going to do the repetition of the Amidah for the Kehillah in Nusach Sfard, I'm very likely to make a mistake because I've just said it one way and now I've got to say it another way. So the halacha is that if you are the Chazan, you say your silent Shemona Esra in whatever Nusach it is that you're going to say the Kehillah one. So it's the same for somebody who davens Nusach Sfard, who goes to a Nusach Ashkenaz shul and is takes the Amud, he has to say his silent Shmona Esra in the Nusach Ashkenaz. So, V'tein Talumata is the same thing. This is Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says that if you are the Chazan, even though normally, let's say you're from Chutz La'aretz, you come to Eretz Yisrael, but you're going to go back before the 4th of December. And so you, according to what we said before, you're going to stick with V'tein Bracha in your private prayers. But then you have to go to the Amud for whatever reason. In that silent Shmona Esra, you have to say V'tein Talumata Libracha, because you've got to say what you're going to say in the Shliach Tzibur one, in the repetition. Yeah? Understand that? So the general rule is that if you're going to be wherever you're going to be for the whole Tkufa, so it's nothing to do with your citizenship, as it were, it's about where you live. It's not like second day Yom Tov, where if you are an Israeli, you live in Israel, and you go to Chutz La'aretz, you do not have to keep second day Yom Tov. In fact, you should not keep second day Yom Tov. It would be wrong for you to keep second day Yom Tov because you wouldn't be putting on tefillin when you should be, etc., etc. And that doesn't make any difference if you're there for a year, you're there for 2 years. If you have the intention to go back to Eretz Yisrael, if you're on Shlichut, for example, and you're there in a place in Chutz La'aretz for a year or 2 years, a limited period, you don't have to keep second day Yom Tov. That's not to say you can be Mechalel Yom Tov, as it were, in public. You can't do that. You have to, you have to play the game, as it were, and pretend that you're keeping Yom Tov, but you don't have to keep Yom Tov. Now, so that's to do with citizenship, where you live. Here, we're saying something different. If you are in that place for that period of 7th of Cheshvan to the 4th of December, so we're talking about a period of approximately 5 weeks, 4.5, 5 weeks. If you're going to be in a period for that whole time, you do it as they do it. But if you're not going to be there in the whole time, then you do it for where you're going back to, where you belong, as it were, where your center of life is. That's the basic halacha, and it works both ways. There is another opinion that says it doesn't work both ways, and that because of the centrality of Eretz Yisrael, that somebody who comes to Eretz Yisrael to visit should say what we're saying here, because, as it were, it's wrong, inverted commas, to say what is to be said outside of Israel in Israel. As it were, Israel is a higher nusach, if you like. That's a minority opinion, but there are people that hold like that. So it's a little bit complicated. So in each situation, you need to ask the question, how long am I going to be there? Am I going to be there the whole time? Where is my center of life? It's a bit difficult for people. Say, Frank's a good example because he spends pretty much, well, it's getting that way, isn't it, Frank? Pretty much, half and half. At some point, you have to make a decision. At the moment, it might be a little bit more in Chutz La'aretz, more here. Okay, so a little bit more here. Okay, this is where I belong, as it were. So you'll make your decision on that basis. Somebody who's a little bit more the other way, but you have to know where you are. Where is your center of life? It's a bit, I suppose it's a bit like where you pay your taxes, right? Wherever your center of life is, that's where you pay your taxes. That's how it works. So you have to know where you belong, inverted commas, and you have to know how long you're going to be there. If it turns out your plans change, well, okay, your plans change. But when you start, you've got to know, am I going to be there for a week? Am I going to be there for the whole period? Where do I actually live? And then you can work out how you should do it. So we've gone up a few minutes over. So I'll stop there. Let me just ask, first of all, if there's any questions in the room, and then I'll go to questions on Zoom. I can see you, Johnny, you've got your hand up. Let me go to the room first. Any questions in the room? Yeah. How many things have you done wrong today, Bernard? 12 before Birchat HaShachar last week. Today it was okay. Okay, great. Bernard's done okay today. Okay, Johnny, what was your question? Speak up loud so we can hear.
In your private Amidah, or the one for davening for Amud, if you say the wrong one, what happens?
Okay, that's a whole nother question that I never got to.
I thought that's what you're going to learn.
Yeah, and I was, but I ran out of time. So I'll summarize it very briefly. V'tein talumata livracha should be said in the Birchat Hashanim, in that bracha of Barech Aleinu. If you say it wrong and you don't mention talumata livracha, but you haven't yet said Baruch Atah Hashem Mavarech Hashanim, you say it there and then. In other words, if you said V'tein Baracha and then remembered straight away, say V'sein Talumat Bracha. If you've already said Baruch Atah Hashem Mavarech Hashanim, you get another chance. You can say it in the bracha of Shomea Tefilah, because Shomea Tefilah is another bracha where we're general requests. So you can say it immediately before the part where it says Ki ata Shomea Tefilah kol peh if you're in Nusach Sfad, or Ki ata Shomea Tefilah Zamcha Barachmim if you're in Nusach Ashkenaz. Immediately before Ki ata Shomea, you can say V'tein Talumat Livracha there. If you forget that one, you've got a third chance. You can say it immediately before Ritzei, because Ritzei is another request bracha, Ritzei. So you can say it immediately before that. If you miss that, you can still say it before Yehi Ratzon after Osei Shalom. And then if you don't remember it from then, and you've already gone backwards, you got to go a whole lot of start all over again.
And if you're davening for the Amud?
If you're davening for the Amud, somebody will scream at you long before you get to Baruch Atah Hashem Mavarech Hashem. They're just waiting for it, Johnny. There are people whose whole lives are dedicated to correcting people who make mistakes from the Amud. And you won't get past the second syllable before somebody's down your throat. So don't worry about the Amud. I will send out a summary on the group of the halachot of what you do if you make a mistake, so that you've actually got it in writing, and you can actually look at it and see and have it there in case you make a mistake.
For a number, Johnny.
Well, he just wants to know. He wants to know how quickly he should scream at somebody if they get it wrong. Isn't that right, Johnny?
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. There are some people that their whole ambition in life is to be the person that bangs on the Amud and says, Yalla v'yavai, v'sein talamot livracha. It's, that's it. They've reached the peak of their existence. Okay, any other questions either in the room or on Zoom? Yes, Frank.
My imagine if someone tells me that if you've done it and you're not sure whether you say Ten Barak out, Ten Tal, that if it happens in the first 30 days, you don't have to say the whole thing, and then after that you can assume you've got.
Okay, so Frank has raised the issue, another issue which I was intending to cover. I know we're going on. Those that feel they want to go. Those that want to stay, I'll answer that question now because it's an important question. The question was, what do you do if you get to the end of your Shemona Esrei and you think, I'm not sure, did I say V'tein Talumat Livracha or not? So Frank says he thinks that there's something to do with 30 days. And it's a fascinating subject, this. It's all about human nature. Because what's to do with 30 days? What's the big deal about 30 days? 30 days means, if you daven 3 times a day, 90 tefillot, right? So the halacha, let's go to Mashiv HaRuach first. The halacha is that if you are not sure whether you've said Mashiv HaRuach Moed HaGeshem for the first 30 days, then you have to go back again, because it's assumed that you haven't, because for the previous 6 months, you have been used to saying Morid Atal or nothing, depending on what you say at that point. And after 30 days of saying, after 90 times of saying Mashiv HaRuach Moed HaGeshem, you've got used to it. It like falls off the tongue, It just flows, but only after 90 times. So after 30 days, you can assume you've said it right. Before 30 days, you have to assume you said it wrong. Now, the Chachamim, and I say that not in the Chachamim, the Zichronim Lavracha, I mean the Chachamim, the clever dicks, say, okay, I'll tell you what if we say it 90 times on the trot? And you say that 90 times on the trot, say, I've said it 90 times, I'm now used to it. And there is an opinion. I don't like this opinion at all. I don't hold by it. And there are plenty of rabbis that don't hold from it. there are opinions that if you do that, it counts. And then if you're then not sure, you can assume you've said it. It's come on, who are you trying to kid? But anyway, so Mashiva Ruach. Why have I gone back to Mashiva Ruach? Because 30 days is 90 tefillot for Mashiva Ruach. It's not for Tein Talumata Livracha, is it? Why is it not? How many days does it take to get to 90 times V'tein Talumata Livracha? You don't say it on Shabbat, correct? So that you're missing 3 tefillot out of your 30 days. How many Shabbatot are there in 30 days? 4 or 5, depending how it falls. So, although the halacha is it's 30 days, it shouldn't be. The halacha should be
35.
that it should be 34 or 35, because you've got to say those 90 tefillot. And the other thing is, what if you miss a mincha or a mariv one day, or a shacharis even, right? And you forget to daven, or what? Is it 30 days or is it 90 tefillot? Well, clearly it's 90 tefillot, because there is this opinion that if you say it 90 times one after the other, it counts. So the simple summary of that is, if you're not sure and it's within 30 days, or if it's within 34, 35 days, and you've not missed any tefillot, you can assume that you've said it right, and you don't have to return to the beginning and do it again. But if it's less than that, you have to assume you've done it wrong, and you have to go back. And then if et chata'ai ani mazkir hayom, you're like me, that happened to me once, I went back and did it again, and I forgot it again, and I had to do it a third time. And that's just purely because you don't concentrate properly, because at least you should be concentrating the second time when you've realized you've done it wrong, and you do it again wrong. Well, that's really stupid. Okay, any other questions? Okay, we'll call it a day there. Next week we will, unless I think of anything other exciting to do next week, we will continue and maybe get to Birchat HaShachar next week and see how we go from there. Okay.
Thanks, Johnny. Thank you.
Bye, everybody on Zoom. Bye-bye.